Welcome to this retrospective slash review of Beyond Oasis. And today I'm going to kind of basically do the same type of review like I did for Altered Beast. I'm going to have the game rolling in the background so you see all the, you know, gameplay and whatnot of it going on the screen. And the reason why I'm doing that for this game, just like Altered Beast, is basically you can get Beyond Oasis pretty much any platform you could possibly think of: Switch, PS4, Xbox, Steam. It's there on all of them. I personally bought it on Steam, and I do believe it's still 99 cents, like most of the games in the Sega Genesis collection. So it's very cheap if you want to pick and choose which game you get. Um, like if you don't want all the Genesis games. So it's kind of a cheaper and easier way of doing it via the collection there on Steam. But that's neither here nor there. We're going to go ahead and talk about this game. And what I'd like to go ahead and say for starters is that I did enjoy playing it. It's a very good game, and obvious comparisons being to basically Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, which came out on Super Nintendo. So it's obviously a very similar style game, same type of gameplay and everything. And it's a fun game. Now, go ahead and this. First of all, I'll just say that I think the graphics were very good in it, and I think the music was very good. Um, I will say it's very interesting that when I went to play it on Steam, because there was a challenge you could get in the game, so I played it on Steam a little bit, and believe it or not, I do believe the emulation done in the Genesis collection, for some reason, the music and whatnot, it actually sounded better playing it via the collection emulator. So that may be something to consider. Is it did sound better? So maybe I need to play with my emulator uh, sound settings to make them sound similar to what was on the Genesis collection. I'm not really sure, but I don't know. It just had a small, distinct, better sound to it when running through the collection emulator. And the music itself is by Yuzo Koshiro, he's done a lot of good video games. I'm not familiar with a lot of his Sega work because I didn't have a Sega growing up, but he did do stuff like ActRaiser, and so definitely he's a very talented musician, and I love his music, and his music was good in this game. I liked it. I'm not going to say it was probably his best work, but it was good. It was definitely a good addition to the game for sure. Now, one of the things that I kind of liked, but also at the same time didn't like, was the map feature in this game. So I thought it was really neat at first because you could see the whole island with a map, the way it was set up. But then it loses a lot of detail, and that's when you start comparing it to Zelda. And I think that's probably one of the biggest downfalls of this game. Is like when you compare it to Zelda, there's just no map details there, like that you can pull up. Um, and then like when you're in the dungeons, there is no dungeon map that you can pull up to kind of give yourself some sort of idea of where you're going. So you're kind of going a little bit blind, as it were, or I don't know. It just, the map, it looked good. I will say it looked good, but it functionally, it wasn't very good from a functional perspective, unfortunately. Um, Challenge of the game. To be completely honest, most of the game was not that challenging. I mean, if you saw my last video, I actually beat the final boss of the game pretty easily. He wasn't that bad. Fairly similar to Zelda, I'd say probably the biggest challenge of this game came by doing the mini games. The mini games themselves were uh, extremely challenging, at least in the case of the secret pits and the secret cliffs. Those two, I call them mini games. they're too a little bit challenging to be called a game, but anyway, they were very tough. Um, but for the most part, the game itself, if you just stick to the main storyline itself, is not that challenging. Um, I mean, granted, towards the end there, it had a lot of the infinite weapons, and that does make things easier for you. So, part of the much like Zelda, part of the challenge is putting yourself through those challenging moments so that you will have the rest of the game be a little bit easier to play. So that was definitely, par for the course here as well. Well, as you can see on screen right now, I do believe the four spirits, that was an interesting touch to the game. But to be honest, I didn't really use them that much except when I needed to. So it was a nice addition, but it was kind of a superfluous addition, if you will. But it's still kind of nice. Um, the different ways of attacking is pretty decent. It almost kind of like had a fighting game feel to it. Not a fighting game, but more like a brawler, kind of like something like Streets of Rage or Final Fight, where if you could, string together like a bunch of B attacks, you could do different things. So it was kind of cool in that regards, but it was also limited more to just like your knife, basically. Because a lot of the stuff that you could do with a knife that you couldn't do when you had a sword in hand, for instance. So neat, but kind of limited. Um, and also when we talk about the overworld map, we also got to talk about the fact that the overworld itself really isn't that expansive if you compare it to Zelda. Zelda is just a much bigger world. There's a lot more to do, and even with me struggling through the mini games, I beat this whole game with 100% completion in about 10 hours, which is admittedly a bit on the long side. Because if you look at how long to beat that website, I think they say somewhere around the 6-7 hour mark. So maybe people aren't being honest with their time, or maybe I'm just a little bit slower. It could be both. So, with me being on the slow side here and doing everything 100% completion rate, I still did it in 10 hours. So, I think that it's a good game, but you're not going to get a lot of replayability from it as well. It's kind of one of those one time plays. Probably. I mean, it was a fun game. I don't know if I would come back to it or not because I do have a very large backlog of games I want to play. So I don't think it'd be one of those I would come back to. But if you've never played it, it's definitely something you should give it give a try. Um, and personally, I think I would rate this game uh, 4 stars out of 5, so about an 80%. It's definitely good. I mean, a lot of the features of it are really neat, and there's a pretty decent storyline here to it. It's fairly generic, all things considered, and I kind of saw the twist at the end there coming. It wasn't that well choreographed as it were, but pretty decent story. And for the most part, you play it for the gameplay, and it is a fun game to play. Um, Good game, good graphics, good sound. It's a fun game, but it's not one that's going to take a long time for you to get your play out of it. And it's not. I wouldn't say it's incredibly difficult to figure out how to get through parts. I did have a reference guide for a few things here and there when I just didn't want to put forth the effort of figuring out what the puzzles were trying to tell me, and I did reference it here and there. Um, and I think that was more. Oh, son of a gun! They showed that trick there that I learned at the end of the game. Whatever. The I think the guy was better for people trying to do 100% completion rate because that was where a lot of the more intricate portions of the game I needed a guide for. If I were to just play through the game not worrying about 100% completion, probably wouldn't need the guide very very much at all, really. But for those who do want to do 100% playthrough and say like not watch my videos and just play through it themselves, I'll go ahead and put a link to one of the websites I use, RPG Classics. That was the main one I used, and it does a very good job, but it doesn't do a huge playthrough with lots of maps and whatnot. So sometimes if you want some maps, you might have to go to, say, GameFAQs.com for some maps, which I almost never did. So they do tell you how to do things, but it doesn't explicitly lay it out for you, step by step, map by map, and tell you everything to do. So if you're still trying to figure it out on your own, using that guide as a reference was really good, and that's what I did. I only used it as a reference when I needed to. Um, oh yeah, and I guess I could say while we see the Ifrit uh, floating on the screen here, control in this game is actually pretty decent, with the exception of jumping mechanics. Jumping mechanics did feel a little bit wonky, but I would say the control was good as well. So anyway, that's pretty much my brief retrospective and retro review for playing this game. Like, it's about 80% or 4 stars out of 5. It's a really good game. Not not quite up to the Zelda level if you're looking for that type of game, but if you want to play a Zelda type game, something new, this is a good game for people who like that type of gameplay, and it's something you could get in and play through pretty quickly. Just get that quick Zelda itch out of the way. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care. Goodbye, old guy.